I talked to Stacy and I decided I was just going to tell some stories about growing up with Dad. First memory I had of Dad was apparently he had a hard time coming down for breakfast on time. So, so Mom called him down for breakfast one morning. Came down for breakfast completely naked.
All right.
But darn it, he was on time.
You did that in a hotel in Francis.
And Austin, Texas.
And at one point when we were kids, we were playing Go Fish, and it was Dad's turn. Instead of saying go fish, Dad said, go play with yourself. I don't know where he came up with that.
No.
I'm sorry, Dave, I know you're shocked.
And Dad and I one time went to Indian Guides camp, and somehow his glasses fell off into the water. And of course, it wasn't a pool, it was a lake. So it was right at the dock. So, of course, being the kid, I was like, I'm going to find Dad's glasses. And darn it if I didn't find them. And he gave me some money for it. That was kind of cool. This was a great one. Stacy was always the one who got good grades. Randy and I, well, we did, well, I'd say we did our best, but that would be a lie. So Stacy decided, Dad said there was monetary points for, you got money for A's and B's. He wasn't sure what to do with D's and F's. So Stacy said, well, how about a swift kick in the butt? So needless to say, I got some kicks. The good news is when Dad did that, he was always sitting in his recliner and had the recliner up, so it didn't hurt very much. But Dad and I used to go out for boys' night. The first one I remember, we went to go see the movie Rocky. That was awesome. I think I've seen everyone since then. We used to go on trips, and we went on trips. Sometimes Mom and Dad would talk, both philosophy majors, they had a lot to discuss, but Mom would get tired. She'd say, all right, it's your turn, Chip. So Dad and I would chat so Mom could take a nap. Two things that I remember about Sea Isle. When we went to Sea Isle, where my grandmother and grandfather lived, the end of it ended at the beach, so it was a dead end. And we would dance in the street, Dad and the three of us, at the end. I think it was pretty much the end of every trip. And then, what was it we used to hum going into Sea Isle?
The British national? The French national.
How did you know that?
Because I did it with him as well.
Oh, okay. How was it that I did it with him and had no idea, but she did? Did you actually ask him what it was?
No, I didn't know what it is. I just started doing Star Wars towards the end.
I was on key.
Of course.
Well, you
of
would
course.
have been the only one.
Well, of course. Yes.
Why in the world that was what we sang? I have no idea.
I don't know. We never sang anything. We just kind of ba-ba, ba-ba, whatever it was.
No, I sang the words.
Okay.
No, I don't remember that. Okay, I'll take your word for it. And this story wasn't funny, but it was still a good story. Apparently, Dad took Randy and I to get our haircuts at one point, and apparently we acted up very badly at the place we got our haircut. And then after that, he took us to Your Capital Beverage, and somehow we managed to break the sink or the faucet in the bathroom. Dad was not happy with us for that. One time, Randy, I can't remember what he did, doesn't really matter. Dad was chasing Randy around the house, pulling chairs out to try and stop him. Randy was hurtling the chairs. Finally, Randy took off outside the front door. Dad just ran out the door, screamed at him, "You have to come back sometime!" And I'm sure as Randy was running, Randy was going, "Oh, crap." Of course, when I turned 16, Dad took me out to teach me how to drive. And we went down to Your Country Day, which is just down the street from us. And for some reason, I could not get that steering wheel to go. Dad's like, come on, it's not that bad. There's nothing wrong with it. Well, it turned out the power steering was broken. And the last one, this was a classic. In junior high, I know, I was doing something stupid. Shocking, right? It was 7th grade, we were doing it in junior high, they were called operettas. Actually, 8th grade. This is 8th grade. We were doing one called Disco Disco. And of course, I was being silly. And I slipped and fell and landed on my wrist. Got to be broken. Dad said, no, if your wrist was broken, you wouldn't be able to talk to me. Well, turned out it's a good thing Dad wasn't a doctor because my wrist was broken. But I have to say it was a lot of fun growing up with Dad and Mom. A lot of laughs. Happy birthday, Dad. If anybody has Siri, they'll find us amusing. Oh, not Alexa, not Siri, Alexa. Alexa, my heart. Playing Achy Breaky Heart. No, I'm having a heart attack. Art Attack is a 90s children's TV show. Alexa, my arm is sore. New alarm set for 4. Alexa, for the love of fuck, call me an ambulance. Thank you. I will now refer to you as an ambulance.
And I was reviewing this with Al, and he said, you forgot wife. Oh, yes, and wife. But one of my most favorite titles is Art's Daughter.
Yeah.
So, are you Art's daughter? So many people would ask me in introductions, and I would say proudly, yes. The person I'm being introduced to always tells me how wonderful my dad is, and I totally agree. My dad knew LOL long before the popular acronym actually existed. He always laughs out loud. Everybody here knows that. I always know where my dad is at a party by the sound of the voice. That laugh. And I love that sound. There are times when the laugh may be too long or too loud for some, but not for Art's daughter. His support over these past 44 years has been nothing.
How old are you, Chip? Chip, how old are you?
40. He doesn't know.
Apparently, I'm the oldest, except when it benefits her, then she's the oldest.
Well, she remembered. 44 years.
44 years, nothing less than Herculean his support. Always there with love, support, and guidance, and an occasional nudge. My dad asks all the questions about my work or life with so much energy and passion, and remembers all the players in my life, co-workers, bosses, and friends. With this knowledge, he can and often does help me navigate through the rough waters. He is really amazing, as all of us here already know. He is truly the hardest working, most wonderful dad a girl could ever ask for. I'm so happy to be Art's daughter.
Stacy sent it chips, and they go back a little bit further than those stories.
Last 44 years.
That's it. So I want to tell you, before Art and I met,
That's what I feel about my sister.
as you know, he was the firstborn of Art and Gina, who doted upon him. However, eventually they had to get back to their daily routine, work and housework and so forth. And also, I was on the way. So they got their heads together and decided, since he was getting underfoot, opening cupboard doors, knocking precious knickknacks, just getting in their on their nerves. So rumor has it that Big Art took a clothesline in the backyard and strung it. You would think for Gina to hang clothes. No. This was to tether Arthur. So they knew where he was at every minute of the day. However, most of their neighbors used playpens for that.
You couldn't be saying that.
Oh, he still has a coat on.
So next we move on to Art and I in grade school. Art had a good friend named Ralphie Critero. And Art and Ralphie used to play poker together. Now, my best friend Kathy was Ralphie's sister. So Kathy Critero and I did a lot of things together. And this was about the time period when Art was maybe 13 and I was 3 years younger. So it was time for Art and Ralphie to go off to high school. Art, as many know, went to St. Joe's Prep, a private school. And I was under the idea that Ralphie wanted to go there too. but for some reason his parents said, no, you're going to go to the regular diocesan high school, Father Judge. Well, I was always proud that Art was in St. Joe's Prep, but I didn't know how proud I really was. Because one day, after he had attended for nearly a year, little sister Kathy came over and read me the Riot Act. She said, I've had enough of you. I don't know why I'm your friend, because all you do is brag about your big brother. Artie does this, Artie does that. He's so smart, he goes to the prep. She said, my brother Artie is just as smart, maybe smarter than your brother, but I never go around bragging about my stupid brother. So then we move on a little bit to Art in high school. Art had a girl that he dated named Sue. Mother and Dad put restrictions on him on the amount of time he could spend with Sue. So one day when I was riding the Philadelphia City bus home from my high school, I looked out the window to see Art and Sue, hand in hand, walking down the street as Arthur smoked a cigarette. Ah, I had it now.
Oh man, you were screwed.
Uh-huh. So as you know, he was dressed all in black because that's the way we did that in Philadelphia. So he stuck out and I could see him easily. However, as soon as we got home, I took him aside and said, for the next week, you will do everything I ask you to.
Whoa.
And you will beg for more jobs because I will keep my mouth shut if you do. It does. And finally, I have to tell you about Art and I as adults. All right, so many of you know that our mother Gina was sick for quite a few years and she was bedridden. So we three children did our best to comfort her and to cater for what she needed, and we had nurses' aides taking care of her. So Gina never took kindly to the nurses' aides because she didn't like extra women in her house, and we had to, deal with that and talk to her often to try to bring her back down. So one spring, I decided it was time for me to take a break. I just needed to get away. And my friend Joy back there, she and I went to Florida, and we told Art and Tom and Paul, it's time to step up. We don't want Mother to know I'm away. I'm not telling her. So just go see her as often as you need. And whenever she asks about me, say, oh, she's really busy at work this week. We'll help you. What do you need? So we got on the plane, went to Florida. And as soon as we got off, we looked for a nice place to have lunch. And we found a place out by the bay. There's a table and everything was quiet. And just a beautiful afternoon. As soon as we sat down, the phone rang. The cell phone. So Joy looked at it, Art Nelson. So Joy answered the phone. Art told her there was trouble at home. Please put his sister on the line now. Joy replied, I am Patty's agent. She will accept no calls at this time. I let a good 24 hours go because at the end of her line, she said, Art, I know you can take care of it. But all in all, Art and I have a great relationship as a brother and sister, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
You can still give me instructions all these years later.
Have to make Art happy. It's his birthday.
President of the company.
It's a shared duty. Well, anyhow, Tom wasn't sure if he was going to be here, so being a smart brother that I am, I called on Tom for collaboration. And he could tell me some things as he said, Paul, you can say anything you want, because who's going to be there to refute it except Patty, and she'll never refute it.
I like
There's a lot of smut here.
All right.
I don't really care if it's true. So anyhow, it started back in the day. I had to get my cheaters on so I can make sure I can read every detail correctly. So a little bit of dovetails to some things that Patty says, so it must be true. So back on Stanwood Street, where we lived in Philadelphia, I lived there till age 3, and I have a vivid memory of it all. But some of the things that Tom relayed to me that it came back to me once he started to talk about these things. He said that there was an itinerant piano teacher named Mrs. Miller And for whatever reason, Art wasn't getting piano lessons, probably because he had no talent. But Patty and Tommy did get lessons from Mrs. Miller. And apparently on Valentine's Day or thereabout, back in the day, when Art was either a junior or a senior in high school, old enough to know better, they were talking about this wonderful Valentine's cake that they had purchased, and from a specialty store. As Tom said, not just like a Giant, but like from a real place in Philadelphia. And so they were talking to us about Mrs. Miller, the piano teacher, and for whatever reason, she also had an interest in baked goods. And she asked if she could see this beautiful cake that they had been bragging about. So Art dutifully said, "I'll get the cake, Mrs. Miller," which he probably brought out to show her, except he dropped it face down on the floor and completely ruined everything. There was a little lack of coordination there. He's probably distracted by some of the other things he was doing that he shouldn't have been doing that Patty had come to know. And then Tom also talked about he believed it to be a 1959 Buick with the name of Zarf. Now apparently this name Zarf is still really relevant in Art's life because it's one of his passwords, and I didn't realize it was the name of the old black Buick. I guess it wasn't old at the time. And according to Tom, it had these really nice black fins that everybody thought was very cool back in the day. And again, this Sue character creeps in. So apparently Art was returning back from a date with his date Sue. Not a boy named Sue, this is a girl named Sue. That has relevance a little further on, because that was a Johnny Cash tune.
Thank you for that clarification.
So he's returning back, and I guess he was somewhat distracted. Apparently he misjudged where the garage was, and he took off one of the fins.
Taking driving lessons from Patty?
Well, Patty learned at his knee. And she said, "Oh, I'll do anything that SOB does." And she did. So then, you know, Art noticed the Johnny Cash reference, as Patty alluded to earlier, always dressed in black. And according to Tom, this is a calculated look. And on occasion, he'd wear a red shirt, a mafioso look. And apparently, Art would hang out because he would have to go to the bus stop before catching the subway and then catching the L to go to school down at the prep. Apparently, church ladies would routinely see Art hanging out and report to Mom that Art looked like a hood.
Dad looked like a hood.
At that point in time, he's probably trying to make a life choice of how to make his living. Now, it was also reported that Art's black look was not a tribute to Johnny Cash, but more modeling the 77 Sunset Strip TV show, which I vaguely remember. But apparently it was a big deal for Art. And as Pat alluded to earlier, this friend of Art's, and he was really into poker. I guess Art became quite a poker player, even though Tom said he was way too young to be admitted to the crew, even though he wanted to be. Once again, his big brother disappointed him. And then, as I understand, Art used to take, as I said earlier, he had to take the subway and then to the L to go to the prep. But Tom said he was always coming home with stories about intrigue and survival on his trip. And Tom felt that the crescendo really was built up when he couldn't account maybe for where some of his money had gone earlier that day, so he alluded to that it was taken from him. Perhaps he's buying some of those dirty cigarettes, we don't know. Maybe he's buying something for Sue, who knows? It's hard to say. But Tom didn't always believe all of his embellishment. At the time he did, but he began to catch on because the embellishment continued to grow each day. Now here's an interesting story, now Father Tancredi's here, so he might appreciate this kind of thing. I'm sure he never experienced this. But Art was a good guy, and one of his early jobs he had in life was selling the Philadelphia Inquirer and then at the time the Bulletin in front of church on Sundays. And this seemed like a noble job, and it made money, and it was profitable, so profitable that one day he got to sell this venture. However, at the time, he had to learn his negotiating skills because the evil pastor, Father Godfrey, who according to not only Tom but Patty, was not a nice man. Wow. Imagine that. And so, according to lore, Father Godfrey used to try to shake Art down for a percentage of his sales. I don't know, Father. I'm just repeating. I don't feel I have to go for
Philadelphia guys.
I may go to confession for this, I'm not really sure. But only if I'm lying. And so Art would have to try and negotiate to get a bigger percentage of the money that the evil priest wanted to take from young Arthur. Imagine that. So, Art, having survived that, And I'm also supposed to tell, because Tom mentioned this, just so people know that you're not making this up, not that any of you could refute it. But Art will remember that his neighbors were Sid Anderson on the left and the Aponics on the right. Now, I don't know what relevance that has other than to jog his memory. And then, so, if you wanted to look up for historical perspective, it's true. So then I also learned the story, and it's not necessarily an art story, but it's a growing up story in Philadelphia. When Mom and Dad were selling the house on Stanwood Street, the Pelusos bought the house. And Dominic Peluso, what ethnicity do you think he was Tom's good friend. And so anyhow, when they showed up to put a down payment on the house, they put a cash down payment on the house, like in suitcases. What did the Pelusos do for a living? I don't know. We can let our imagination run wild. And then Tom's not sure if the Pelusos actually paid for the rest of the house in cash or not. But regardless, that night, when they dropped the cash off, and big guy, I guess, decided to put a chain on the door that night, apparently there was, according to Patty, and she verified this, there was a lot of rattling at the doors if someone was trying to get in. And they had to turn on all the lights on because they were asleep, and they hoped that chased the evil person away who may have been coming back to get the Aponics money. The Pelusos money. I'm not really sure. But apparently that's a true story. So moving on, Art, this had to be when he was still in Philadelphia. Art achieved the rank of Life Scout. And the only reason he wasn't an Eagle Scout, for some strange reason, he couldn't pass the swimming merit badge. Now, our family was swimming challenged. Aside from Stacy. But apparently our father was a very good swimmer, like really good swimmer, according to Patty and according to Tom. So we couldn't figure out why Art couldn't learn this crucial thing to become an Eagle Scout. But regardless, he has to spend the rest of his life as a Life Scout. Now the other thing Father Tancredi that you might be interested in, you probably already heard this, I'm sure, maybe divinely, is, according to our parents, when Art went to Catholic U and he studied philosophy, apparently many of the clergy, both nuns and priests, had mentioned to our parents at graduation or prior to graduation, I'm not sure about that they thought Art was going to go on to become a priest. Now apparently they didn't know about his childhood on Stanwood Street. So I don't know anything about that, but he obviously didn't choose the priesthood. I guess Claudia got in the way. Imagine that. She replaced Sue, she replaced the priesthood. Quite the influence. So, the other weird thing about Art, too, growing up that I never understood is whenever we had these big family meals, Art always had to sit at some special frickin' seat. If anybody else sat in the seat, they had to move. And it's like, why do we have to move? Because Art's a lefty. As if it was an affliction. Maybe it is. And then, later in life, when because keep in mind, Art's substantially older than I am. 20-some years. It's hard to tell. Yeah, well, I'm trying to relate to Stacy. So later in life, when I was like 11 or 12, Art became like a second dad to me, which was a problem for me. He was much worse than the original. It was a troublesome turn of events. And I'm going to come up with a couple of things that he used to try and do later on that were a problem, but I do try to keep things in story order. So at one point in time, after Art and Claudia got married, I thought it was interesting that they lived as trolls in the family basement. And we weren't allowed down there because that's where Art and Claudia lived. In fact, I thought it was kind of cool because when I went down there, they put the damn Cocker Spaniels at the top of the steps to keep me there. It was a family plot, but it was true. And one of the things that Art did when he became my second dad is my first dad was trying to get me to get a haircut, and I didn't want to get a haircut. And that's when we were at Thomas Institute downtown. So he enlisted Art to take me for a haircut. And I knew this wasn't good for me. So I did the only sensible thing that Randy learned eventually, was I ran away. And he didn't catch me. And then he had to go back to Thompson and admit that I gave him the slip, which was a problem because nobody knew where I was. Of course, back then downtown wasn't as dangerous as it is now. I was comfortable. But eventually, like Art said, I had to return. But if I recall correctly, I negotiated my way back. Like if I wouldn't get in trouble, I would actually come in. But again, Art was a troublesome father. The other real problem was when my parents went away, and they went away frequently, our parents went away, it was kind of a cool thing for me, right? Get away with a lot of stuff. And Tom and I had this agreement. If I didn't do anything that would bring the police or cause him future problem with the parents, he would leave me alone as long as I stay out of his way. That was a pretty easy thing for me to keep. But I don't know what happened. Maybe he was away at college or something. I don't really recall. But they decided to put Art in charge when they went away. This was sad. Art took his duties seriously. And he would just show up at random times, and he'd come in and want to inspect the house, get down the basement, look things over. All my friends were concerned about this as well. To highlight one of these events, we were having a party at the house. This was the next day. And one of the things we did after having a party is we took it very seriously, our duties to clean the house. In fact, clean the house better than what it was before. And so, for whatever reason, I wasn't at the house. Who knows where I was? But my friends were in the house, and they were cleaning diligently. And I, Paul, put the garage door up to come back in the house, and for whatever reason, they assumed it was Art. They all fled. When I came in, the frickin' doors were open. There was appliances out back. I remember the toaster was out back because they were cleaning the bottom of the toaster. They just dropped it where it was, and they ran. It took me like 45 minutes to find them, and they said, "Oh my God, what happened when Art came home? Did you get in trouble?" And I said, "No, Art's not there." And they said, "Oh my God, we thought that was Art." So even the neighborhood kids were afraid of Art. I don't know what he would have done to us, but much worse than Mom and Dad. Now, the other thing, too, moving forward, if those of you who know the Nelsons know that we have an affliction, it's called falling asleep. Now Art denies that he falls asleep, which I think is kind of cute. But we know for a fact, even though I've heard him deny it in the past, so maybe this is just folklore, but I believe it to be true, and if it's not, I'm sure there's other instances just like it. At a party at his house, when he fell asleep upstairs in the bathroom on the floor, and the people couldn't get in the bathroom because Art was sound asleep and he couldn't be woken. Now, this isn't unusual to me, but apparently the people who were trying to get in the bathroom thought this was interesting. It wasn't because he was drinking too much. He just needed to take a nap. Now, here's another interesting later in Art's life. This was probably only a few short years ago, but time does fly. I don't know how many of you know that Art is a pugilist. That means he likes to look for trouble and start fights. So as I understand it, a few years ago, when Art was down with, I think the boys, right? I think they were downtown for the strawberry drop at New Year's Eve. And some guy got pushy with Art, and Art used his left hand and took a swing at the guy. Unfortunately, Art didn't hit the guy because I understand the guy was much younger than Art. And it wouldn't have gone well. But I'm not sure what possessed a man at Art's age to swing at a younger guy regardless of the circumstances. But anyhow, he was trying to probably channel his inner Rocky Marciano or somebody else from 77 Sunset Strip. Now, another interesting experience that I have with Art is going to the Ravens games. And one of the interesting things about Art, I don't know how many of you think of Art as a bully, but when we get to the Ravens games, we cut it very, very close. Like, we try to get there in time for the national anthem. And lo and behold, and look out for the poor devils that are in front of Art when he's walking quickly. I don't care if you have a walker, a cane, Patty, a wheelchair, or anything else. You know, Art doesn't care. He just walks this incredibly brisk pace for anybody. I don't care what your damn age is. That guy can walk through a crowd. And then if you get in the way, well, he just goes right through. And I'm left to pick up the pieces, people staring at me because I'm behind him. Now, the interesting thing is, you know, and Claudia will acknowledge this pretty readily, and I think Stacy's in on this too, you know, there's certain things in life that Art can afford, probably which is a good pair of rain pants. However, Art chooses not to have a good pair of rain pants. Art goes to the Ravens games, and, you know, in recent years it's rained a lot at these games, and he has these half-ass pants that he's got the cuffs turned up, they're all ripped, they're all torn, and I'm pretty sure he got them from a homeless person that he thought was a street vendor, and he promised to give them back, which he never did. He kept wearing the damn things. I was embarrassed to be seen with him. It takes a lot for me to say that. So for his next birthday or Christmas, whatever it was, I finally got him a pair of rain pants that were decent so the man could, you know, at least look like he could afford the seats we were sitting in. I don't know why this is, but anyhow, he just felt the need to identify with the other people in Baltimore, I guess. It's hard to say. Now, the crowning achievement, as far as I'm concerned, in Art's life, and the biggest embarrassment for the family ever, was at our father's funeral. I probably told the story before, but it doesn't matter. It never stops. It never stops giving for me. And the rest of us too. I wish Tom was here of course he'd be embarrassed, like the rest of us. So at my parents' funeral, they call you up on the altar, and if you want to do like a little brief personal eulogy, you can say something, right? And so Art's the first one that's called up there, and we're sitting there, and of course it's a very solemn time, and everybody's sad, and some people are crying. And I know my turn's up, so I'm kind of nervous, I'm thinking, God, I got to pay attention to what Art's doing so we don't repeat anything here, right? So Art gets up there like Art only does. Art loves the stage. And he's at the microphone, and he's up there professing these different things about Art, and it was really warming, and it was true, and it was very cool, and I'm thinking, damn, it's going to be a tough act to follow, right? So then Art gets to the point where he decides to announce to God, of course we're in a church, and everyone else in attendance, mostly Catholics, that our father grew up not as a Catholic, that he was a convert. And he said this with such sincerity and such conviction and everything else. I'm sitting there going, oh my God. God help me, how could I have not known this? I know in the church, I'm like praying to myself that I didn't know that our father didn't grow up Catholic. And I look over at my mother, but that's no good because she doesn't hear very well. She's just up there nodding. Later on, once I got my act together, I realized, thank heaven she can't hear because she might have had a heart attack right there and we had a second funeral. But Art continued to pontificate about what a great accomplishment it was for him and all the things he accomplished, even though he converted to Catholicism. Well, after I got over my shock, I said to myself, this can't possibly be right, but how could he be saying it in front of all these people? So it wasn't until Tommy and Patty and I got together that we realized that Art had completely, totally screwed up everything. And anybody that was there that was a relative were all wondering the same thing. How could this son defame his father during a funeral like this? But anyhow, that's Art in his memory, and he has such conviction that it was almost believable. I'm sure lots of people believed it. But anyhow, that's my stories about Art, and I hope you all enjoyed him, and he's been a hell of a brother and a great partner.
Dave, and former friend after this. And I thank you all for coming. We've run long, and I can't say anything because we ran out of time. Now, I got a couple announcements before we get started. Art asked me to make these announcements. These are critically important to him. So, he knows that some of the things I say may not be for little children. He also knows that anyone under 18 should not attend this next segment. He also said that if there's any ladies in the audience from age 18 to 25, to meet by my car at 8:30. We're gonna take you on a little historical walking tour of Harrisburg. And all you Cosmos know what that is.
That tour, huh?
Okay, so here we go. I gotta get my first page. Here it is. All right, Nelson. This is your life. I've gotten some wonderful facts today. Art was born on August the 1st. 4th, 1942. She told me first. He was born as Arsenio Big O'Malley Schmedlak in Intercourse, Pennsylvania. By the time Art was 6, he was addicted to sea hunt and changed his last name to Nelson after Mike Nelson, the star of the show. Hard times were upon us in 1942 as World War II was just beginning. Your father, the educator and the engineer, and your beautiful mother, a homemaker, did everything they could to keep food on the table for you and your sister Patty and your brothers Tom and Paul. And when things got really bad, he asked you and your brothers to go out and help by getting jobs. When things really got tough that he couldn't handle things anymore, he asked Patty to go out into the local neighborhood and raise money in any way that she could. But as much as he regretted this, she did it. Determined to help out. Patty went out overnight. And the next morning she returned, only to find your dad at the breakfast table. The first thing your poor dad said was, "Well, how did you do?" And she proudly said, "Dad, I made $1,262.25. And your sweet dad said, "Who gave you the quarter?" And Patty said, "Everyone." So, let's see, where did I leave off? The war ended and Art was off to college, where he remained shy, reserved, quiet. Let's face it, Art, you were as dull as shit. In spite of your being dull, you met Claudia, the love of your life. Claudia was just what Art needed to get Art out of his shell. But Art's shell was harder to break than he imagined. His cure started with the first family pet, a dog. Art, you didn't want the dog, but as all men, you had no choice about it. And whatever the lady of the house wanted, you did.
Yes.
So Claudia shows you the beautiful new beagle that she got, and his name was Pecker. After a while, Art, you started going on into business trips because you knew Pecker was there for Claudia to keep her safe and sound. Eventually, Claudia tells you never to worry about going on a trip alone because she has Pecker, and having Pecker satisfies her. So, once after a long trip, you came home, you were ready for some fun with your bride. You took her hand gently and guided her off to the bedroom. And after a bit, when things were going well, and a beautiful finish was near, Pecker came into the room and jumped up on the chair right beside you. And you kept trying to shoo Pecker away, and he wouldn't go. So finally, Pecker starts to watch you. As you look over the last time at the dog, he yawns. And being upset, you're very upset, you said, "Well, excuse me for boring you," to Pecker. And Claudia says, "Oh, that's okay." I told you this wasn't going to be the fun family event here tonight. So after successfully making and raising a family, you turned to philanthropic work, entered into Cosmopolitan Club International. Can you remember any of these people? Now listen, I'm going to say something, a quote, and you tell me who it is. Hi, Art. Remember when I asked you to send 47 cases of Beck's beer to my boat in Annapolis because I was having 4 girls over for the weekend? Larry Hines. Congratulations. Okay, here's the next one. Hi, Art. Happy birthday. I once was a religious figure at Cosmo and your club chaplain. I realized quickly that trying to redeem and save Cosmopolitan members was like trying to stop a dog turd from going over Niagara Falls. You just can't reach that far. You know who that might be? Father Carlton Creedy. Now here's one. This is a tough one. Think hard. Hi, Art. I sure hope you remember me. We were in your closet together at your house in Wyndham Hills. It was very satisfying. It was a very satisfying moment for me. I tried to show others your closet, but they didn't react like you.
Your friend Jeff.
Jeff, not my friend, buddy. Your friend Jeff Sykes. Yeah. So, now, can I interject anything? Yeah, I'm running short. So before I get to the last part, couple other things we talked about. Now I'm going to eulogize him. This is a man, and I mean this is a man, who would go to a convention with you, bring his KY jelly, just so that he could put it underneath the knob of someone's bedroom door, so that when they climb in at 2 in the morning, they got KY jelly all over their hands and they don't know it. This is the man. This is the man right here. Wonderful guy. This is a man that would have a, not Roman, medieval party, hired kids from high school, serve turkey legs, and then stand and make me tell jokes until 4:30 in the morning. That's the man I'm talking about right here. That's the man. This is a man that held parties that were so wild, people got divorced from them. Okay? Yeah. Anybody that was there? No. Yep. This is a man who's been my friend for one hell of a long time. And we've had a lot of good times together. A lot of good times. But this was a man that told me one time that he didn't like baseball. And so we went with Larry Heim, you, I, and Chip to an Orioles game. You remember? About those O's. So we decide we're going to, she doesn't know anything about this, by the way. We're going to surprise the crap out of her right now. We decided that we weren't going home, or I wasn't going home, to my wife Mary, right here.
Oh, great. Now he points me out.
Unless we caught one of the fly balls, which never happened. So we bought an Orioles ball, and on the way out to the car in Peanut Heaven, we took this ball and threw it on the ground 4 or 5 times and got it all dirty, and that was going to be the game ball. And boy, when I walked in with that, whew, I'll tell you, big night, big, huge night, vast. It was going to change tonight. We've done so many things, I just don't know where to begin. So I thought I'd write something fun, and I hope you enjoyed it. I have one passing final thought, and that is, as years passed, and now we're at Bart's 77th birthday. Bart, I'm asking this question. Do you remember when you gave me this advice? You said to me one time, when you're proud of something, Dave, build a shed over it. So, this is my tool shed. I'm very proud. And all I have to say is, Art, you must not be very proud. Love you, brother.